Motor Press Guild is very proud and happy to participate in Electrify Expo. We appreciate the opportunity to do that. Great panelists here. Ed Kim is president of Auto Pacific and chief analyst. Ed Lowe is head of editorial for Motor Trend Group. So I think we can make ourselves at home here, guys.
All right.
Sit down, talk about this.
What are the chances you get two Eds?
Two Eds, right.
Two Asian Eds.
I know.
And both of them have names that are 5 letters
Right.
long. Like,
Well, I can tell you
winning
apart because, well, you're both wearing glasses, aren't you?
DEI
Okay, so I
Olympics.
can't tell.
Here, this is great.
All right, let's go through this. This is called Industry Leaders and Laggards, or Laggers. I'd say laggards, because I'm an editor, as you are, Ed.
Laggards.
Laggards, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we should say that, and that seems kind of harsh, right? But
Yes.
we'll
But
go
let's
through
get
that.
harsh.
We'll talk about that and you know, see what this is all about. Here's the first slide, and I'm told you probably can't see these very well from, well, I guess you can see them pretty well. But this asks about where we are in terms of the overall electrification scheme of things. Are we moving forward rapidly? Are we moving forward not so rapidly? Or kind of in between? I think the big answer here is we're about 10 years away.
Yeah.
Ed Kim, what do you think about that?
I'm firmly in the 10-year away camp as well. I think that actually, in terms of product, we're making some really great progress. There's a lot of great EVs in the marketplace now. There's a lot of great EVs coming down the pipeline, but where we're really lagging and where there's a real opportunity, well, not even opportunity, a real need for massive improvement is in the public charging infrastructure, as well as the home, charging at home as well, because for a lot of people that can be an extremely expensive process to do the electrical upgrades to get your house ready and all that.
Right.
So I think infrastructure, charging is really the limiting factor here. The cars are great, great advancements there, but the infrastructure, we need some work.
Ed Lowe, where do you think we are? Are we 10 years away, 5 years away? Is it beyond the horizon?
It's a good question. I think we talk a lot about today about where we seem to be past the early adopter phase and we're at sort of the start of what we think will be mass adoption. But I'm curious about the survey participants. This is MPG, so this is mostly this coast, right?
This is auto journalists largely from this coast.
So this is, I think we might be seeing a little bit of a coastal elite bias. Like we actually, as much as we complain about infrastructure here, California leads the country in EV adoption by a huge margin, right? Like we have more people here. I think the last thing I saw is over 900,000 EVs have been sold in California alone. The next closest state is I think Texas, and then it's Florida, and they're down below 100,000 in terms of sales. So I think if you ask this question in the middle of the country or in the south or even in the northeast where it gets cold, you would see maybe the red portion a lot bigger or the blue portion even larger. So I wish we were in the orange. I think that this is inevitable. I talk about how EV adoption I feel like has to happen, but in truth I think we are somewhere red or blue.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ed, I think you actually make a great point about this survey being really West Coast. The people who took this survey are all from this side of the country. I travel pretty frequently, and there are a lot, in fact, most of the rest of the country is nothing like California in terms of EV adoption. And
they hate us.
When I said 10 years, I was actually thinking California. That's just kind of where my head went because that's my natural everyday environment. But if we're talking about the entire country, yeah, maybe it's more than 10 years.
So maybe you're blue when you're talking about the entire country,
well,
right?
I don't
that's
think,
25 years. That's a lot longer than 10. But.
Well, I don't think the 25-year thing says no solution in the foreseeable future. I think there are solutions in the foreseeable future, but it may be more than 10 years.
Yeah. Well, let's go to reasons, and you guys both alluded to it. Certainly you did, Ed Kim. Infrastructure, right? Infrastructure. Yeah. There's a bunch of things on this list that maybe you can read, and I can almost read them too. Infrastructure, price, misinformation, range anxiety, raw materials for production, other reasons that we're not where maybe we would like to be. Comment on infrastructure first, and then I've got another question for each of you.
Well, look, we've been testing a lot of EVs at Motor Trend. We have 7 or 8 in fleet right now. We've been doing it for a long time. And I think this is really, the infrastructure problem has really come to a head in the last couple of years. And it sort of tracks with overall EV adoption. We're getting a lot more complaints about it. The early adopters have adopted, and they have adopted largely Teslas, and they don't have the same problems, just straight up. Supercharger network is awesome. They're clean, they're well lit, they have bathrooms. None of the other charging networks have really any of that, and it's starting to really get ugly out there if you look, especially on social media. So with a bullet infrastructure, I would also say misinformation. I'm surprised it's such a short bar. I feel like there's a lot of anxiety over everything else about EVs, and that is largely misinformed. But you know, I think we're all doing our best in the room to solve for that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ed. You know, infrastructure, obviously long way to go, and I agree with everything you said about adoption being a big factor here. Now, Auto Pacific's consumer data also really it comes out lower here, range anxiety, but in Auto Pacific's syndicated studies, our data consistently continues to show that range anxiety is still one of the top rejection reasons among consumers for not wanting to go electric. There are a lot of people who are very interested and excited about the idea of going electric, but and even though EV range has been going up very significantly over the last few years, the fact that there is sparser infrastructure, the fact that home charging may not be an option for a lot of people, because of those factors, range is something that they're very, very.
Well, do you think range anxiety is a bit of misinformation? Could we be expressing it that way now? Does that make sense?
Well, to some degree, but you know, let's say you live in an apartment where you don't have your own driveway, you don't have a charger at home. You're completely dependent on the state of the public charging infrastructure out there. Now in California, it's better than other places, but you know, to your point earlier, let's say you live in Kansas and you know, you've got an EV, and you're going to be concerned about how far the car can go because you may not have access. In fact, you probably won't have access to the sort of charging density that you have here on this coast.
I would posit this, that not just infrastructure, but everything on this list is critical, right? I mean, if you don't have all of that stuff happening, you're probably not going to get mass adoption. What do you think
agreed.
about that, Edlo?
Well, I think that's noble for you to think that the consumer cares about the availability of raw materials for production. But in truth, I think it actually does come down to range anxiety, infrastructure, but primarily people are price conscious. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of criticism about EVs being only for the rich, and the challenge for OEMs to bring the price down so that more people can actually get into, and I'm talking full battery electric, because obviously hybrids and plug-in hybrids are available at much lower price points. But yeah, we did a study on an audience survey, and people, we like to think that everybody's out here buying EVs because they care about the polar bears. They don't. Like, they really, it's not on their mind. They want the features, the convenience. They want to be able to go wherever they want to go. And the idea of never having to go to a gas station is, you know, dawning on folks. But ultimately, it's like, what can I do with the vehicle, and how much do I have to spend?
And to that, and to expand on that, most consumers aren't like us. We're kind of living and breathing cars.
They're not nearly as good looking, for example.
Well, the general consumer is really just concerned about just, hey, does it work? And is it going to save me money? And right now, for the mainstream non-early adopter consumer, it's not saving the money yet because the price of the vehicles themselves are significantly higher than the equivalent ICE vehicles. You know, getting charging installed at home can be very, very expensive. So the price thing isn't quite, the price part of the equation isn't yet there for the mainstream consumer. So that absolutely is something that is critical for mainstream adoption.
Yeah, okay. Let's look at some other things in the survey. And this is about what element of the industry is holding us back. Why aren't we moving forward more rapidly? And the biggest one here, of course, well, actually, this is a different slide than
This
I
one's
have.
on leading the
Yeah,
way.
this is
Not
actually
this is
about
leading the
which
language.
which area is leading the way here, and this is saying automakers, right? I think a lot of people might suggest that government is really spurring what the automakers are doing, but discuss that a little bit,
Well,
would you?
yeah. So I think there's this sort of very binary perception out there sometimes that, you know, it's either you know, regulatory demand can come from regulatory push or consumer pull. But I would maintain that it can actually come from both. And I think this chart here actually sort of you know, reflects that. Regulation and legislation can create demand. I think you know, I think without any sort of government intervention, I mean, you know, before we saw all these EVs over the last 10, 15 years, there were relatively very few consumers who were saying, I really want an electric car. It took you know, various governments around the world incentivizing EV technology to get people to see them, notice them, and then ultimately that in turn inspired demand for these vehicles. So I would say, you know, both automakers and government really have very, very equal parts, very, very important parts in leading the way.
And
I agree, and I wish more of our audience on social media understood that, because I made a comment earlier when I had Mark Dipko up here. You know, that truck over there, Ford F-150 Lightning, Motor Trend's Truck of the Year, when we announced it, we just got annihilated in social media, on Facebook, on Instagram. Like, you know, why'd you pick that thing at the towing range and this and that? And we've done a lot of coverage. The top 5 stories so far year to date have all been on electric vehicles. Some of them have, quite frankly, been hate reads. People like who are like internal combustion fans, like just wishing that these things would go away. And we get the comments all the time. You guys are on the payroll, this is on the agenda, and it's like, hey, we're Motor Trend, we don't build cars. We're not the ones, why are you mad at us? We cover the vehicles from the car manufacturers, and this changeover is happening. Now, what's driving it? Yes, it's things like the Biden Inflation Reduction Act, it's some of these infrastructure changes. But this is where it's very interesting to me that so many of you in MPG believe that the government can have so much responsibility for getting, you know, the OEMs and the consumers interested in these vehicles, because you know, it certainly isn't that way on the consumer end.
isn't it concerning that consumer interest is such a small piece of this pie?
Yes, 100%. But we gotta hurry, Jack. We got like a ton of slides.
Right.
Like, we got a lightning round this.
Okay. We're talking about leaders and laggards, okay? So which automaker is leading the e-transportation industry in terms of product, path to market, all of this stuff, consumer sentiment? It's pretty clear that Tesla is the big kahuna. You want to
Yeah, and
attack that?
it's really become clear that not only are they leading the way as an EV, the first sort of successful EV brand that then vaulted into sort of the premium space, but I think they're going to go down in history as the first software-defined vehicle. Well, I keep talking about it, but the fact that they were the first to pioneer OTA, over-the-air updates, this is 10 years ago, and there are certain manufacturers that still can't do it reliably today, that's absolutely huge. The fascinating point on this slide, though, to me, is where Toyota is here in terms of leading, and then as you'll see in the next slide, they might have almost an equal share in terms of lagging. So I think that sort of, you see that in their product split. They're way more heavy on hybrids and getting into plug-in hybrids. They're only now starting to come to market with full battery electrics, but I will pause there for the sake of time.
So I agree with everything you said about Tesla. And to expand a little bit on Toyota, Toyota's a really interesting one because our consumer data, even today, even though Toyota only has one EV that's kind of barely in the market right now, the perception by consumers is that Toyota is a leader in electrification. And of course, that is, you know, that a lot of that, in fact, most of that is goodwill that carries over from the two.
Well,
plus
and they
decades
have the
they've been doing
most
hybrids.
electrified vehicles,
Absolutely.
right? Quote unquote, electrified vehicles.
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of hybrids, I mean, they're the clear leader in hybrids, both in terms of market share and, in my opinion, how well they work. I mean, these are really good. So the perception of Toyota as an EV leader is very interesting, because the reality, of course, right now is that they don't offer a whole lot of EVs. They've got one in the marketplace, and like I said, it's kind of barely in the marketplace. So yeah, the next few years will be interesting to see how that perception may or may not change.
I think we'd be remiss not to remark about how big a piece of the pie Hyundai had on that last slide, and the excellence of their, and this is like their entire motor group, like the eGMP platform for Ioniq 5, for EV6, for GV60. Like this is like spot on.
Absolutely, in incredible vehicles.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. I'm going to skip a slide, I think, and go to laggards. Laggards, because we want to talk about that. We only have a few minutes left, so let's talk about that.
Right. So Toyota, Toyota comes up strong here as well. Again, like I said on the last slide, Toyota doesn't have a lot of EVs in the marketplace, and especially, this was, this survey was done among MPG members who are, aware of sort of the news that's happening within the auto industry, and so, everyone who took the survey is no doubt aware of Toyota's, kind of reticence to dive into EVs. So, I'm assuming
well,
that.
let me ask you this, Ed, because I have you here on the spot and you can't say no to this.
Okay.
Is their strategy right? Have they been doing what they should be doing, or are they really laggards?
No, so I have sort of a contrarian viewpoint on this, which is that Toyota's not stupid. They are very smart and measured in how they do things. I think they correctly believe that there is still a huge market, untapped market for hybrids out there, for people who are ready to dip their toes in electrification, but for a variety of reasons just aren't ready to go full electric just yet. I think Toyota's time to go fully electric will come, but I do agree with them that there is a huge market for traditional hybrids, and the more of these hybrids are in the marketplace, the better for greenhouse gas emissions, the better for CAFE, the less we use and the less we emit, and I think that's all positive. So I think Toyota's addressing that part of the market that's not fully ready to go all electric, and I think that's fine.
What's your sense of that, Edlo?
I agree. I would say Toyota's, the logic is sound. Akio came out pretty hard before he stepping into the chairman role, saying that, for every one full battery electric any of these other guys can make, we can make 4 to 10 hybrids that overall do more towards the cause of greenhouse gas reduction, which is a solid argument. It's also what you would say if you're not selling a bunch of battery electric vehicles. But I think more pointedly, they're in a good position because they have a lot of smart people. They can get there with the technology. It's the other guys maybe in this pie that should be concerned. And I would look strongly at Honda, like, hey, how come no one's asking Honda these hard questions, right? Because they are not as robust on either hybrids or plug-in hybrids, and certainly not in the EV space, as well as Stellantis, right? They've had some, I think they just took over, or they recently surpassed in terms of plug-in hybrid adoption with Jeep Wrangler 4xe, and that's all great. But you guys are like, Stellantis is 14 brands. Like, where's the rest of the product line? You have some of the most iconic nameplates. Let's get after it.
Well, I think for both, just if I may real quick, for both Honda and for Stellantis, at least we see that there are things coming down the line. Of this group here, the one that kind of concerns me is Mazda. Now, Mazda is a brand that,
so small.
So many of us enthusiasts love, but more so than pretty much any other brand I can think of, they've really just kind of not gone down that route. Right now they've got a 90-mile range, MX-30 that's really just a compliance car. There's a plug-in hybrid now available in the CX-90, but they haven't really talked about a full electrification strategy, a roadmap, or anything like that.
Another brand I think that kind of cries out for this, the brand image kind of cries out for EVs is Subaru. And yet Subaru is lagging. Talk about that a little, would you?
Well, they're lucky, I think. They're kind of drafting off of Toyota, so maybe I love Subaru, I love Mazda. I fear for the smaller brands that are going to get swept up in this coming shift. Again, not just EVs, but software-defined vehicles and everything coming out of China. Like you're talking about a global marketplace where millions, billions of first-generation drivers that don't have the sentimentality or the nostalgia for some of these brands. And these Chinese cars are delivering a user experience in the car that right now a lot of legacy OEMs cannot match. And it's going to be, the thing that came out recently was an article that said, I think it was Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, that said the Chinese market might not even need Ford or Chevy or any of these heavyweight American brands, especially if they're not competitive. They might only want the luxury stuff that we have, but only just if those brands can deliver that user experience. So I worry about everybody on this list because I love all cars. I love all car manufacturers. I hope they do good things.
What do you think the takeaway here is, Ed Kim?
Well,
kind of sum it up for us.
To sum it all up, yeah, I think there's there's a long way to go. There's a lot that needs to be accomplished, and I guess my closing thought, and this is sort of a take on what you were just talking about, Ed. The Chinese brands, the Chinese automakers. Most of us have just no idea just how advanced these Chinese EVs are. I mean, these, if you hopped into any number of them, you'd feel like you just stepped into a sci-fi movie. You're driving a car from 25 years in the future. Yet these things are here now. Ignore them at your peril, and that's what I say to the industry.
BYD, XPeng, and NIO. Spend some time, if you can, with those vehicles. Like, just look into them.
Okay. Well, that wraps it up for us. I would encourage all of you who are journalists to join us at MPG Drive Day on June 6th. And thanks so much for listening to our explanation of this survey and the survey results. We appreciate it.